I'm Dan Marino. I'm a UX engineer on trust and safety, and I'm going to talk to you about killing off a dependency that has been making life harder, and now the modern web has given us something nicer. If you want to follow along with the slides, you can scan the QR code, but there's no extra content there that you're not going to see. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the Sweetest Alert. And again, this is a dialogue migration story, part technical, part strategic, and hopefully a little inspiring. SweetAlert has definitely overstayed, in my opinion. It's bloated. It includes toast, input modals, animations, fancy graphics. You can drag them around the screen if that's your jam. But the reality is we don't really use most of what SweetAlert offers. We're very inconsistent with what version we're using throughout our apps. They're currently supporting 3 different major releases across our repos, and then there are also minor versions that we're supporting. So that just makes time for the design engineering team a little more not fun, having to support the, I forget what the package is called, but yeah. Is that what it's called? Inconsistent UX. We've extended SweetAlert in ways that don't necessarily follow suit with Tapestry design specs. That also leads to inconsistency. It's outdated. It was written before Dialog had real browser support, and I don't believe the versions of SweetAlert that we're using is using Dialog. I could be wrong. Maybe there's just some versions that aren't using it. And then also the kind of the elephant in the room, the ethics. I don't really love shipping software that includes those types of things in it, but especially a church management platform, it'd just be kind of nice to not have to pay any mind to that. So talking about the dialogue element, it really is a gift. It has focus trapping built in, so when you press tab, it's not going to leave the dialogue window. Huge accessibility win there. That you just get that for free. Keyboard support, escape to close. Again, tab order, it's all native. Get it for free. You get the backdrop element, which is easy to style, so you don't have an extra div, no extra DOM, no finicky styles. You're not worried about making sure it's rendered at the end of your body tag and all that. And then also top layer promotion. So the DOM has this layer that's dedicated just for dialogues and popovers and things like that. And there are no Z-index wars. It just wins every time. So it's just really awesome as an API to use. Again, hundreds of lines of JavaScript and CSS and SweetAlert to support this. The browser just does it. We get it for free. And again, it just really enhances accessibility support. So, as you're all aware, I created the Sweetest Alert, and thanks to Peter, my teammate on Trust and Safety, I was going to call it Sweeter Alert. And he said, no, it's the Sweetest Alert. It's an imperative utility. I call it a component, but it's technically not a component. But the way it was built is intentional. It is built on React, but the API is basically a function call. Because the vast majority of the time when we're using it, we're saying user clicks a thing and we need to confirm. And that's imperative in nature. It's built specifically for Planning Center. Our Tapestry tokens are baked in. It uses Tapestry components like icons and buttons. So anytime buttons get an update or icons get an update, they're just going to work. If we end up including an input to type to confirm Sweetest Alert, it will use a Tapestry input component. All just work. And that's an example of the code of what it looks like. The only required options are the title and the content. Everything else is just optional. Though if you don't add an onConfirm function, you're probably not going to get much mileage out of it, to be fair. So by the numbers, SweetAlert is roughly 24 kilobytes and a horrific amount of CSS. Sweetest Alert clocks in at around 3 kilobytes and only 64 lines of CSS. 8 times reduction in JavaScript, 20 times reduction in CSS. And yeah, 24 kilobytes isn't really a lot, but it definitely adds up if you go user by user. And again, less code to support. Who doesn't like that? So the strategy here, I think the temptation, most everyone's instinct is probably thinking like, we got to do a big rewrite, come up with a migration plan, announce a deadline, and we've all been there, Phoenix. And there's a time and a place for that. But what I actually did was to simplify this and just make it easy. What would an MVP look like? What's the bare minimum we need to ship a version of this? What if we just focused on one app? And in my case, I focused on accounts. So my first step was to inventory all the instances of SweetAlert. We have them in React. We have SweetAlerts in Rails, which adds some extra complexity. I talked to Ryan, my UXD, got a firm understanding of what the specs actually are. Look for versions that we're doing that don't fall in line with those specs. And so the first version I did was I built a component inside of accounts. And I just found some, 2 or 3 instances that were in very small, very out of the way places as a proof of concept. And then over time, we just kept doing another 2 or 3 at a time, dogfooding the Sweetest Alert. That allows us to see, okay, well, maybe we need to change the API a little bit to support this case. And it just made the flow really easy and simple and resulted in a lot less code than it would have been had we tried to build everything all at once. And so once I had all the React versions of Sweetest Alert taken care of, I extracted this to an NPM package. I use Claude to help write tests, docs, a demo, and that URL in the side there of the browser Chrome, that's live. You can look at that. You can see these working. And then we switched accounts over to use the new NPM package. And then came Rails support. This isn't bundled in the NPM package. This is something I did in accounts, kind of proof of concept-y. I guess the only way we could really support this as a all-in-one is if it were a gem. I don't know enough about that, but if enough people are interested, we could certainly do that. But the result is a very thin wrapper for Stimulus. We're still importing Sweetest Alert, and we're just forwarding all the data attributes that you specify in a Stimulus controller, we're forwarding them to Sweetest Alert. And you can see in the ERB usage that there's a helper that I created as well that easily gives us the data attributes that we need to help reduce some of the ceremony around that. So using AI, I already said I used it to help build out parts of the component, doing docs and demo, because I always put off writing and I don't particularly enjoy it. It did help with migration, using it to look for similar instances that I could use to replace in combined PRs, flagged edge cases. I still reviewed everything, but it compressed this project from weeks into days. And the result for accounts is there are 0 SweetAlert instances remaining. Yeah, you can clap. Yeah, I'll take it. And then Yarn removed SweetAlert too. That felt very good to run. So thank you. I don't have a talk channel in Slack for this, but you can hit me on Slack. You can check out the source code. If you want to talk about how I can help you get Sweetest Alert into your app, all ears. I'd love to to get this out there. Thank you.